Go stand at your kitchen counter tonight. You eat the peach, you wipe your hands, and your thumb pushes that wet pit toward the trash can like it is nothing. Stop right there. Your great-grandmother never made that motion. She wiped the pit on her apron and set it on the windowsill to dry. And 4 years later, her children were eating off the tree it became. Same pit, same hand. One of you grew an orchard for free, and one of you is going to pay $40 a tree for the rest of your life. The difference is 3 steps nobody teaches anymore. Let me teach them slow. There is a dollar peach in your kitchen right now, and inside it is a whole fruit tree you are about to throw away. Not a seed for a tree, the tree. And come spring, when that pit is already gone to the landfill, you will drive to a garden center and hand a man $30, $40, $60 for the same tree that started as a pit somebody threw out last Tuesday. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it is the whole video in one breath. The pit is free. The tree from the pit is free. And somebody had a real good reason to make you forget that. If your people ever fed themselves off their own ground, and you could not grow a season of fruit today to save your life, sit down, neighbor. This is the one I need you to hear. I am Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge. My family has held this ground since the 1790s, and I have got my grandfather Eli's leather journal open on the desk in front of me while I tell you this. Before Eli died, he made me swear the knowing in this book would not die with him. This video is me keeping my word. I am going to be straight with you the whole way, including the parts the garden center leaves out, because a ridge farmer's grandson does not lie about the ground. Now here is the honest note before we even start, because I will not sell you a fairy tale. A pit from a peach you loved is not going to grow you the exact same peach. That is a horticultural fact, and I am not going to hide it in the fine print. Seedlings do not come true to the parent. What the seedling gives you is a real peach tree that puts real peaches on a real table, maybe better than the parent, maybe a little worse, sometimes surprisingly close, and always its own tree. Hold on to that, because there is a trick coming near the end that fixes it entirely, and it is the piece they buried the hardest. Before we go on, there is one number worth knowing. 3 days. That is about what your grocery store holds in stock if the trucks quit running. 3 days. Eli's pantry and the row of fruit trees behind this cabin held a whole winter, and the difference was never money. It was knowing. I set that knowing down, 94 pages of it, in a book at silasmercer.shop, link below, and I will not bring it up again. It is a paper copy too, printed and mailed to your door for the folks who do not trust the computer. All right, back to it. Here is the map of where we are going. There are 3 real steps to raising a fruit tree from a pit, and I am going to walk you through every one of them slow. Then I am going to show you the 5 fruits worth starting this way, easiest to fussiest, so you know what to reach for first. And then, at the very end, the buried piece, the trick that turns one free pit into any variety of fruit you want, forever, without ever paying a nursery again. The first 3 steps you can pick up in an afternoon. The buried piece is the one that changes everything. We build to it. Tap subscribe before we get in. Not for me. Because we are pulling this old self-fed way of living back onto the American yard, one pit at a time, and the garden center trade would rather you never relearned it. Step 1. Save the pit and clean it. This is the whole beginning, and it is the step most folks skip without knowing they skipped it. You take that pit off your cutting board, and before it goes anywhere near storage, you rub it under running water until every last scrap of orange flesh is gone. Every scrap. Then you set it on a wooden shelf or a saucer out of the sun, and you let it air dry a day or 2. That is it. 5 minutes of work spread over 2 days. Here is why it matters. And here is where most folks lose the whole batch on their first try. If you leave fruit flesh on that pit and drop it straight into a jar of damp sand, you are not growing a tree. You are growing mold. The sugar in that leftover flesh is a feast for every fungus in your kitchen, and it will turn your seed black before it ever wakes up. Clean pit, dry pit, then storage. You know you did it right when the pit is pale and dry to the touch and there is not a thread of fruit clinging in the seam. You know you did it wrong when it still feels sticky or smells sweet. If it smells sweet, it is still feeding something. Clean it again. Eli did this with a paring knife on the porch rail. You can do it standing at your kitchen sink tonight. And the minute you do, you are already ahead of the man who threw his in the trash. Step 2. Give the pit a winter. This is the step nobody tells you, and it is the reason your pit sat in a cup on the sill for a year and did nothing. A stone fruit seed is wired by thousands of years of evolution to not sprout until it has felt a real cold spell pass. That is the tree protecting itself, so it does not wake up in a warm October and get killed by December. If you skip the cold, the pit sits there like a rock forever. If you give it the cold, come spring a root pushes out. We call it giving it a winter. The nursery folks call it cold, moist stratification. And here is the whole method. Take your cleaned, dried pit, wrap it in a handful of damp sand, damp peat, or even a damp paper towel, seal it in a mason jar or a zip bag, and set it in the back of your refrigerator. Not the freezer. The refrigerator, where it holds somewhere around 34 to 40 degrees, that is the cold the seed is waiting for. Eli wrote the timing down in that journal in the summer of '58, in pencil, 3 lines. Peach and plum, damp sand, back of the icebox, 90 days. That was the whole method. 90 days. Now here is a thing worth your trust. The University of Minnesota Extension, present day, tells you the same thing. Stone fruit wants a cold, moist chill period, roughly 90 days for peach, closer to 60 for plum, and longer for cherry. Same numbers Eli set down in pencil in 1958. The land-grant university just confirmed what a ridge farmer with an 8th grade education already knew. That is the order of things around here. The old way first, the paperwork second. Here's the part of step 2 most folks get wrong. Moisture. Too dry and the seed dies quiet. Too wet and it molds. The rule the old-timers used was simple. The sand should feel like a wrung-out sponge. Damp to the touch, but nothing drips when you squeeze it. Check the jar every couple weeks. If a pit goes soft or smells off, toss it. It is done. You know step 2 is working when, somewhere around day 60 or 70, you crack the jar and see a white root tip just beginning to push out of the seam. That is the tree waking up in your refrigerator. Now there is a hidden move inside step 2, and it is worth 30 seconds because it saves the stubborn pits. Some stone fruit seeds will sprout with just the cold. Some will not, because that hard outer shell is doing its job, keeping water out. The old orchardist trick, and Eli did this with the corner of a pair of pliers, is to gently crack that outer hull, just enough to let water reach the kernel inside, without crushing the kernel itself. Some folks nick it with a file. Some folks skip at it and let a winter outdoors do it for them. Either way, you are just helping the seed do what it already wants to do. And that outdoor way is worth knowing, because not everybody has a spare refrigerator shelf, and the old subsistence method never needed one. In the fall, after the last peaches of the season, you take the pits, walk to a corner of the yard the mower does not reach, and push them an inch into the soil. That is the whole thing. The winter does the chilling for you. The spring rain wakes them. And by May, you have got seedlings you did not lift a finger for. Half the old farm orchards in this country started exactly like that. Pits chucked in a fence row, forgotten, and found as trees 5 years on. Everything so far your grandfather could have taught you in a single afternoon in the garden. What is coming next is the piece, the seed rack, and the garden center got very quiet about somewhere between about 1900 and 1950. Step 3. Sprout it, then plant it out. Once your pit has had its winter, real or refrigerator, you plant it about an inch deep in a pot of decent potting soil and set it on a sunny windowsill. Keep it damp, not wet. Here is a warning I owe you, because it is where the last batch of folks lose their trees. Do not keep it soaking. A seedling stem that stays too wet gets a thing called damping off, where the little stalk rots right at the soil line and folds over dead in the morning. Damp, not drowned. In a few weeks, sometime sooner, a green shoot comes up and unfolds its first pair of leaves. That, friend, is the moment a peach tree becomes yours. There is no store on earth that sells you that moment for the price of a peach you already ate. You grow that seedling up in the pot until it is a foot tall or so. Then it goes in the ground, and the old method is plain. Dig a hole twice the width of the root ball, no deeper. Set the seedling at the same depth it sat in the pot, no lower, because a buried trunk rots. Backfill with the same soil you dug out, not fancy bagged amendments, because a tree spoiled with rich soil in the hole never sends its roots out looking for more. Water it in. Mulch a ring around the base to hold moisture and keep the mower off. Do it in early spring or late fall, while the tree is dormant. That is the whole transplant. Now let me be honest with you about something, because I have earned the right to by botching it myself. The first apricot pit I ever tried to sprout, I was maybe 18 and thought I knew better than the old man. I did not clean it right, left some fruit on, wrapped it wet in a rag, and threw it in the pantry and forgot it. 2 months later, I opened it up in February, and it was a black, moldy mess. I carried it out to Eli, and he looked at it, looked at me, and said 3 words. "Try again, son." That was it. No lecture. He just handed me another apricot off the shelf and told me to clean it this time. I have grown apricots from pits ever since, so if your first one rots on you, that is not you failing. That is the price of learning something they quit teaching. Try again. All right. You have got the 3 steps. Now let me tell you which fruits to reach for, because they are not all equal, and the order matters. I will count them the way I would rank them for a first-timer, easiest to fussiest. The plum is your easy one, and if you try one pit this season, make it a plum. Purple, red, or the wild American plum along a fence line, they take to seedling growing better than any other stone fruit there is. Old smallholders planted plum pits by the dozen because even the seedlings that did not come true still gave usable fruit for jam, sauce, and drying. 60 to 90 days of cold, planted in spring, and by the time you are looking at retirement, it is dropping fruit on your grandkids. A bearing plum at a nursery runs you $25 minimum. A plum pit costs you the 2 seconds it takes not to throw it away. Eli had one in the back that his own father planted around 1922, out of a plum somebody carried up from Virginia. That one tree fed 4 generations of Mercers. One dropped pit. 4 generations. Never a bill. The peach is nearly as willing, and it is the one most of you have sitting in the kitchen right now. 90 days of cold, same 3 steps. And here is the good news with peaches. Seedlings often come surprisingly close to the parent because a lot of what is sold is grown on its own roots anyway. A peach seedling can bear in 3 to 4 years, faster than most folks expect from something free. The cherry is the finicky one, so I will not lie to you. Cherry stones want a longer cold, often closer to 120, even 150 days, and they do not sprout as freely as plums. But a dooryard cherry by the porch was standard equipment on farmhouses from Maine to Missouri right up until the Second War. One tree keeping a family and pie filling all year. Plant 3 or 4 stones, cull down to the keeper, and you have got your pie tree. That is the old way. You plant more than you need, and you keep the best. The apricot is the one nobody thinks of, the one I rotted at 18. 60 to 70 days of cold, and it is worth the try, but it wants a spot that does not get a hard late frost on the blossoms. because apricots bloom early, and a cold snap in April can cost you the whole crop. And the almond is the honest heartbreak of the list. So hear me plain. An almond from a pit is absolutely a real thing, but it is climate picky. It wants a mild winter and a dry summer. Central California is the poster child, a stretch of the Southwest too. If you live where winter goes hard below zero, or where a late frost hits a blooming tree, an almond seedling will break your heart. And the nursery folks will sell you the tree in either climate and just shrug when it dies. The old orchardist wisdom was simpler. Grow what your ground already grows wild cousins of. Where almonds want to be, they will take a pit and run. Where they do not, plant a plum instead. That is not the almond's fault. That is the map. Notice what none of this has cost you so far. A peach you already ate. What is coming next is the piece that replaces a whole shelf at the garden center, the one with the price tags. So let me stop and tell you why you never learned any of this. Because it is not an accident, and it is not a conspiracy either. Between roughly 1900 and 1950, in about one lifetime, the American home orchard got quietly replaced. Not by a law, by a catalog. The grafted, named cultivar, the tree that gives the exact same apple or peach every single time, got mass marketed to home growers as the modern way, and the old habit of saving pits and raising your own seedlings got labeled backward, unreliable, hillbilly. The stated reason was quality. The actual driver was simpler than that. A grafted tree in a plastic pot is a thing a man can sell you. A pit is a thing you throw away. One of those two built the parking lot at your garden center, and it was not the free one. I do not call that a conspiracy, neighbor. It is worse than a conspiracy, because nobody had to sit down in a room and arrange it. Nobody outlawed the pit. Nobody had to. They just made the free version look like the poor version, and a couple of generations quietly stopped handing it down. That is nobody's sin. But it can be mended, and mending it is exactly what you are doing tonight. Now let me say the whole thing once more, slow, for the folks with a pencil. Step 1. Save the pit and scrub every scrap of fruit off it. Then dry it 2 days out of the sun. Step 2. Wrap it in sand as damp as a wrung-out sponge, seal it in a jar, and set it in the back of the refrigerator, 34 to 40 degrees. 90 days for peach, 60 for plum, up toward 120 for cherry. Crack the hull with pliers if it is stubborn. Step 3. Pot it an inch deep on a sunny sill. Keep it damp, not wet, so it does not damp off. And plant it out at a foot tall, same depth it was in the pot, in dormant season. That is the whole of it. That is a free orchard. Here is the buried piece, the one I promised, the one that changes everything. Remember I told you a seedling does not come true to the parent. If you want the exact fruit, the specific peach, the specific plum, you take your seedling, once it has grown a year or two, and put on a good pencil-thick trunk, and you graft a small piece of a known variety onto it. That is it. A cutting the size of a pencil, off a neighbor's tree, a friend's orchard, an old homestead down the road that still fruits, joined to the root and lower trunk of your seedling. Your free seedling becomes the rootstock. The cutting becomes the fruiting top. And now you have got an exact variety fruit tree that cost you a pit and a cutting. This is exactly, precisely what the nursery does. This is their whole trade. They graft a name top onto a cheap root and charge you $35. Learn one grafting cut. The whip and tongue is the classic, and any county extension pamphlet still teaches it, and you have unlocked the entire system. One free pit, one free cutting, any variety you want. That is the piece they buried the hardest, because it is the one that ends you as a customer for the next 50 years. And that is why the old home orchard was never a neat row of tagged, purchased trees. It was a rough dozen seedlings, half of them lousy, half of them keepers, and you kept the keepers and let the lousy ones be shade, or firewood, or a hedge along the pasture that broke the wind and fed the bees in April. Modern horticulture calls that inefficient. The old farmer called it Tuesday, and a family fed off a dozen mixed seedlings ate more fruit in a year than the average grocery shopper eats in 3. That man from the start, the one whose great-grandmother set the pit on the windowsill, that was not a poor family. That was a fed family. And the record shows those trees outlasted the folks who planted them. Some of them are likely still standing. This one behind my cabin, the plum from Virginia, still drops fruit every August, and it has never once seen a nursery. Here is the honest part before I let you go, because I am not selling you fear. Nobody outlawed the pit in a courthouse. Nobody is coming to inspect your refrigerator for a jar of damp sand. This is not prepper talk. It is a habit your family kept for 200 years and dropped in one. And getting it back costs you nothing but a little attention. And a real caution. Climates vary, seedlings vary, and some of what I told you will not work everywhere. If you are not sure what grows on your ground, call your county extension office. That is what they are there for, and they will tell you free. So here is what I want you to do this week. Not all 5 species, not grafting, not an orchard. Just one thing. Save the pit from the next peach you eat, or better yet a plum, the easy one. Scrub it clean and set it in a jar of damp sand in the back of the fridge. Mark the date. That is the smallest step on this whole list, and it is the only one that matters tonight, because the man who does the smallest step beats the man who means to do the big one someday. I did the plum myself, my first year back on this ridge, in my 30s. 6 pits in a jar in November. 3 sprouted, 2 made it to transplant, 1 is still out there, and it fruits every single August. That whole tree cost me the decision not to throw something away. Now, before you go, I want to hear from you. Did your grandparents keep a pit-grown tree in the yard? What did your people grow out of the supper plate that nobody in the family grows anymore? Put it in the comments and tell me what county you write from. I read every single one, and half my best videos started as somebody's memory down there. And if the comments run toward one fruit more than the others, that is the one I go deep on next. So it is your vote. Next time we are going deeper into apple seeds, pear seeds, and the one wild fruit tree every old homestead kept along the fence line that the modern nursery will not sell you at any price because it does not grow uniform enough for a shelf. There is a reason the old orchards had it, and the new ones do not. And it has nothing to do with how the fruit tastes. If you want to be here when I count that one down, stick around. This channel is one man on a ridge trying to make sure his grandfather's leather journal does not die in a drawer. You showing up is what keeps it going. Your granddad grew every fruit tree on his place out of what he ate, and somebody just did not get the chance to pass it down to you. Now it is yours again. Keep the old ways. They kept us.